If I sound any different during this episode, it's because I'm sick, but whatever. I really like the newest episode of Doctor Who. Hopefully, it's the newest when this video comes out. The Ghost Monument. I've been really enjoying season 11 so far, in general, actually. I think it's a really good series so far, even though we're only 2 episodes in. And I've seen a lot of hate against it. And of course, I imagine some of it's because of the female doctor and everything, but I'm not going to go out and delve into that too far. But I've seen a lot of, because I watched The Ghost Monument and I was worried that it could have been bad. Because the first episode was good, but that could have been a fluke, right? And I was worried that the second episode would have a lot to kind of live up to. But I really enjoyed it, surprisingly enough. And I watched it a second time and I liked it even more. And I went online and I saw a lot of kind of mixed opinions. And so I'm going to kind of put forward my case as for why I enjoyed The Ghost Monument so much. It's a flawed episode, absolutely. There's quite a lot of flaws actually. But I think for what it does, it's quite an ambitious episode. And it kind of goes against a lot of the formula. So this episode, well, the first episode was about establishing a new Doctor and about establishing a lot of the kind of world and, you know, the new characters, the new companions, etc., etc. And this episode was like, okay, cool. So the Doctor's had her one-off adventure to kind of find her bearings and everything and realize that she's the Doctor and everything. So now, for the second adventure, we're going to put her for the ringer. We're going to test her ideals and we're going to make shit not go away. And I really like that because Jodie's Doctor is very much established as sort of the pacifist again, because during Moffat's era, the Doctor went through kind of a rough patch, and my favorite version of the Doctor, I would say, is definitely the kind of pacifist archetype, because I think that's what makes the Doctor an interesting character, because a lot of characters will get into these kind of dangerous situations and stuff, and fix them with violence, you know, by fighting back. And I really like that the Doctor, at least when the Doctor tries to find the pacifist way out of it by outsmarting the enemy rather than fighting them. And that's what Jodie's Doctor is too. She's very empathetic. I mean, in the first episode, she says that she hates knives, and in this second episode, she says that she hates guns. So that's pretty clear characterization. And I like that the second episode kind of tests that. Because in the second episode, she already has to kind of go against her own instinct to win. Because there are a lot of moments where she is friendly towards everyone, like she was in the first episode. There are a lot of moments where she thanks the companions or praises them for going along with her anyway, despite being brought there against their own will. But every time there's any kind of problem, she kind of has to solve it by going against her own instinct. So, for example, there's the gun scene, the Call of Duty scene, which I really like that scene, by the way, because I think Doctor Who always needs a little bit of silliness to it. Because I've seen a lot of people joke about that scene. Same with the salad scene from the first episode. I think Doctor Who always needs a bit of silliness to it. I think Moffat's era, a lot of the time, not all the time, but a lot of the time would take itself a bit too seriously. And so I like it when there's like silly moments every once in a while because it kind of has that Doctor Who cheese to it. But during that scene, you know, Ryan tries to solve the problem with the robots with a gun. And the Doctor has to fix things by being condescending towards him. And she's like, no, you gotta do this. And that kind of goes against how she was acting towards Ryan, at least like in the first episode and in the rest of this episode. She has to kind of grit her teeth and be condescending towards him and be like, no, this is how you do it. And I like that. And I like how in the beginning of the episode with the ship and it's crashing and everything, again, she doesn't solve that problem by being friendly towards the pilot Esbo, but instead she argues with him and she kind of fights with him a bit and she shows off and she's like, no, this is how you do it. And again, if the Doctor from the first episode, you know, the one that beat Tim Shaw by outsmarting him, being friendly towards everyone and all that stuff, like there's a different side to her character there. And I really like that. And I really like this kind of challenging of ideals. And at the end when she beats those cloth monsters, the remnants, she beats them using that cigar. And yes, she still outsmarts the villain and everything, but she takes this guy's cigar that he's been, you know, treasuring for a while and looking forward to using, and she uses it to blow up these aliens. This is very much an episode where the Doctor feels very out of control and tries to seize that control back by kind of clashing against their own ideals, and it's a really interesting internal struggle. Again, execution is important, but I really like how this is kind of portrayed. And yes, the robots are kind of, you know, a pointless threat. and the cloths themselves don't really seem that threatening. But when you kind of stack everything on top of each other, it kind of creates this ongoing stress because people have complained, oh, the whole water subplot doesn't go anywhere. You know, people mention, oh, the water's dangerous. And then they never mention water again in the entire episode. But I kind of like this whole stacking of tension. It's kind of like, oh, this thing's dangerous. Now this thing's dangerous. Now this thing's dangerous. Because it kind of builds a lot of stakes for the Doctor and kind of builds the stress for her. So you can kind of understand why she's getting so heated. And I like that. And she has to kind of work with Espo as well, who is a character that constantly clashes with her in terms of belief and his story about having to jump out of the tree and everything. And Espo doesn't develop too, because I saw there are some complaints, I think, where people complained that Espo kind of developed too quickly, but I would argue the opposite. I don't think he has developed at all, because he starts very selfish and everything and only worrying about himself. But even by the end of the episode, he's still like that, because yes, his cigar gets used to save the day, but it's actually the Doctor and Graham that use the cigar to save the day, not him. At the end of the episode, he sees this as his opportunity to take credit for it. He's like, no, I should win because it was my cigar that was used. So that's still selfish. And even at the end of the episode where Ellen says, no, there can only be one winner and everything, Espo fixes this by threatening Ellen, still being selfish. So Espo doesn't really develop at all. And in fact, there's actually a self-aware line about this where the Doctor asks, oh, have I changed your entire worldview yet? Kind of like sort of poking fun at episodes where that would happen, where a character would go for an arc a bit too quickly. And speaking of a character arc, I really like that they mentioned Ryan and Graham with Grace again. I like that kind of got mentioned, and I liked that Graham admits that you are supposed to talk about that kind of thing. If someone passes away, then you have to talk about it. You have to find closure, and you have to find someone to talk to. Otherwise, you'll just bottle up inside and it won't go anywhere. And I really like that. I really like that he has to mention that to Ryan, because of course it also kind of comes to front that Graham probably learned this from experience. There's probably other people attached to him that he's seen die before too. Especially considering him being a surviving cancer patient too, and his survivor's guilt. And honestly, Graham is just a really good character so far and everything. I really like that the Ghost Monument is the TARDIS. That was a neat little thing. There's a lot of kind of argument being like, oh, the TARDIS should have been, like, it should have had the chameleon circuit activated so that the Doctor wouldn't know it was the TARDIS at first, so that the whole hope is lost moment didn't happen. And again, I don't think that's too important, because yeah, maybe that would have been more interesting. But I kind of like, it shows how fragile the Doctor really is. It makes her feel more human, which I get, she's not a human, but I like the idea of, like, after all this stress building and building and building, and her constantly being optimistic and learning that sometimes she does have to be less optimistic to kind of get through. At the end, when things don't go for her way, she finally kind of breaks for a bit. Not fully, but she kind of loses faith in herself, and it's up to the companions to kind of help cheer her up. And I really like that, because that showed a lot of development from the companion side too, because they've been through a lot too, but the kind of optimistic side of the Doctor has kind of rubbed off on them, and it shows that the four of them are better as a team. And I really liked that moment. And then, of course, the TARDIS comes back. And I saw, like, this really dumb complaint by someone saying that the sonic screwdriver saves the day in this episode because she uses the sonic screwdriver to kind of call the TARDIS towards her. No, she's using the sound of the sonic screwdriver to prove to the TARDIS that it's actually her. That's what it is. The Doctor's recently, changed appearance and everything. And the TARDIS has seen her in that appearance before and everything, but she's using the sound of the sonic screwdriver to kind of calm the TARDIS and bring it towards her. She's not actually like going, I turn the screwdriver on and the TARDIS appears, because yeah. I mean, again, you could argue, well, that doesn't matter, because either way she turns the screwdriver on and the TARDIS appears, and I get that, but the TARDIS was getting there anyway. We could already hear the sound of it. But I mean, hey, you could argue that's pedantic. I think the execution of that was really nice, and her reaction to seeing the TARDIS again was great, because again, it kind of showed that at her lowest point, the TARDIS comes back and she's all happy again and everything. And you have her even denying the fact that she lost faith in herself once she's inside the TARDIS. And it shows a really complex Doctor so far, and an organically complex Doctor. Jodie feels organically complex because these 2 episodes focus more on the emotions of the characters than they do on the actual plot themselves. And because of that, we get through a lot. Now, yes, I agree, Yasmin doesn't get anything really. She gets little bits and pieces here or there about how she shouldn't take her family for granted. Maybe that'll get kind of followed up on in a future episode. But I don't mind too much because Graham and Ryan and the Doctor get so much too. And of course, a lot of people were complaining, oh, why it had to be Grace that got killed off and everything because she was one of the best companions out of the lot. That's kind of the point. I mean, I get it. I would also have liked to see a full series of Grace too, but that's the point in killing her off, is that you do miss her. And so you kind of relate to these characters more because these characters miss Grace too. Another thing was the mention of the Stenza again. So the Stenza is the race that Tim Shaw from the first episode is part of, and it's mentioned in this episode and revealed that the plot of this episode is caused by the Stenza too. The Stenza force a group of scientists to create the deadliest planet and the deadliest weapons possible, and that's why this planet is so deadly and so empty. I really like this. A lot of people felt it was kind of pointless, and I'm not sure if there's going to be if this is the series arc, because Chris Chibnall has said multiple times before that there is going to be no series arc. So yeah, for now, I'll give him some benefit of the doubt and say, okay, there is no series arc. I mean, again, this scene very heavily implies that the Stenza will be coming back in an arc style fashion. But, you know, benefit of the doubt, okay, that was just a cursory mention. I still think it does a lot. Because, first of all, it shows that the TARDIS knows that the Stenza are a threat. Because remember, the TARDIS is the thing that drops the Doctor in Sheffield whilst there's a Stenza there in the first place. And then the TARDIS is on this planet that was caused by the Stenza. And so I feel like the TARDIS is trying to warn the Doctor, oh, this is the problem. So anyone that's like, oh, it's too convenient. Yeah, again, it's been shown time and time again that the TARDIS is sentient. So there's definitely an argument to be made that the TARDIS did this intentionally. It wouldn't be the first time in the franchise the TARDIS has done that at the very least. And so I like this because it kind of brings the characters together a bit more. Because Angstrom mentions that her wife and her family and all of her grief was caused by the Stenza. And this immediately connects Graham to her because, of course, Graham's wife was also killed by the Stenza. And I like that it helps retroactively make Tim Shaw feel like a more threatening villain, or at the very least more of a coward actually, because Tim Shaw had to cheat and he failed. But then when you look at Tim Shaw's race as a whole, you can see that they managed to force this planet to become so dangerous. And this was just the kind of by-result of their weapon testing. So, wow, yeah, that's quite bad. And so if they do come back, they'll seem pretty goddamn threatening. And I am interested in seeing them come back if they do. But even if they don't, it kind of gives the Doctor more perspective and more fleshing out of last week's Monster of the Week, which I think really works. Because this episode, in terms of its sci-fi plot, isn't strong because of the Monster of the Week per se, because, you know, the cloth monsters, you know, the Remnant, and the robots are pretty weak, admittedly. But again, they're there to build the stress and the tension, and the Monster of the Week actual stuff here is used to flesh out the previous Monster of the Week. And I'm definitely in favor of fleshing out the Monster of the Week characters more. So that gets a thumbs up from me too. And this episode really works in terms of world building, because I was already worried that because this series is seeming so character focused so far, that the sci-fi element of the show was going to get kind of glossed past. And we wouldn't really get much depth or information as to the sci-fi side of the show. But this planet, Desolation, got a lot of really interesting stuff in terms of fleshing out. So it's an empty planet. Presumably it had people living there in the past because of the scientists. And of course the Stenza forced the planet to become a testing ground and become so dangerous. And I like the idea of a planet where basically everything there is dangerous. That's really neat. And I love the planet is whacked out of orbit. That's really cool. So the Doctor locked onto the TARDIS and teleported there, but instead her and the companions ended up in space. And that wasn't because the Doctor failed, but it's because of the fact that the planet's out of orbit. So the TARDIS should have been there, but it wasn't because of the planet being out of orbit. That's really cool. And as far as I'm aware, they don't explain why the planet's out of orbit too, which makes it more interesting because I imagine it's probably just a side effect of the Stenza weapon testing, which is really cool. Again, these sort of like sci-fi stuff can exist to just be cool. And that's one of them. I think that's really cool. The race was neat too. I heard people saying that the race thing is like too kind of been there, done that. But I can't think of any situations in New Who where we have had a race like this. Not that I'm aware of anyway. And I think it's a cool plot because again, in the first episode, Tim Shaw's kind of goal was a game. You know, it was a hunt, similar to The Predator, where he was basically doing it for fun, or at least his people forced him to do it for fun. And to prove himself. And so, again, it wasn't, oh, I'm killing people for the sake of it. I mean, he kind of was because of his conquests and the teeth and everything. But there was like kind of more depth to it because of that and because of him cheating. And for the second episode, again, it was another like game. It was a race. And Ilan was forcing these, 40,000 people or 4,000. It's either 4,000 or 40,000 people to race across different planets. But by the time they reach the final planet, there's only 2 of them. And this is really interesting. At least I think so. And you could argue it's been there, done that compared to certain other shows. But Doctor Who itself, again, I've seen all of New Who, and I don't remember this premise being in New Who before. So I think it works, and I think it serves for a really neat kind of background to a story. It feels very kind of unorthodox in setup and in pacing, and you could argue it's bad pacing, and I will agree it's kind of iffy pacing, but I think it works because it feels so different and out of element. And again, that kind of reflects how the Doctor's feeling at that time as well, because the Doctor doesn't feel safe, especially without a TARDIS. So I think that really, really works. Of course, there's a lot more to say. Filming in Africa looked really cool. The directing was really interesting, where the beginning of the episode with like the Doctor and Espo in the ship was like this really cool, like one long take where the director would kind of circle round the characters. That was really neat. I liked that a lot. And it was just a visually really cool looking episode. I mean, again, the designs of the robots left something to be desired, sure. But I like the kind of also visual design that helps kind of add to the planet. Like, oh, these robots have a fucking shooting gallery, which is really neat. And again, kind of ties into the whole, oh, this planet is a training ground kind of thing. That was really neat. I like that a lot. I like the design of the temple. I assume the temple is a place that actually exists in real life, because there's no way they built that thing as a set. And so the episode's visually striking. The TARDIS as well, because I was really worried about the interior of the TARDIS when I saw a leaked image. And the leaked image had the wrong lighting. And I was going to give it the benefit of the doubt. I was like, okay, cool. Let's see it in the proper lighting too. But I was like, I don't know, because can good lighting save the set? It can. It in my opinion, yes. I thought the crystals were a bit much at first, and they kind of are, but I think it fits with the Doctor. Of course, you could argue, why does the TARDIS look like crystals if the sonic screwdriver already looks like crystals? I don't care. I don't mind. There might be an explanation. There might not. I don't care. I just think it looks kind of cool. Again, the crystals are a bit much, but I think the actual design of the console itself with all these like kind of buttons and levers and stuff was really cool. I love the hourglass there, and I love the little like spinning mini see-through TARDIS. And of course, the custard cream dispenser is the coolest thing ever. It's just cheesy enough, you know? Again, Doctor Who needs a little bit of that kind of cheesiness, a little bit of that silliness. Custard cream dispenser was great. I liked that. But they chose the perfect biscuit too, honestly. It's just a fun episode, you know? At least, again, in my opinion, the argument that, oh, nothing really happens in this episode, nothing of consequence really happens in this episode, is kind of dumb, because this episode really, really works if you look at it at kind of a character level. It really gives us some slow time to kind of really go, okay, this is the Doctor and these are the companions. And yes, again, I agree, Yasmin really needs more in terms of a character. You can't have every single episode be a kind of high octane adventure every single week after week. And I would prefer to have a kind of slower one to sort of help flesh people out a bit. And you could argue it was boring, and if you think it's boring, that's neat, but I thought this was way more interesting and way more kind of methodically sort of planned out than people give it credit for. And with the whole cigar scene, I thought that was fine. I like seeing the Doctor being pushed to a limit where she's willing to sacrifice this other person's cigar. And like, you know, you can see them digging so that they have space to duck under the flames. And I like how they set up, like, and she's kind of helping Ryan kind of help her figure out the plan, and having him figure out along with her and be like, oh, this gas is flammable, get it? Which is why it causes such a big explosion. And of course, the fact that this planet seems to be very hot as well helps. And of course, and it's nice as a Doctor Who episode too, because it has like the odd reference here and there, like the Aikido that the third Doctor used. That was neat to see back. I don't know what the whole deal with the Timeless Child is. Timeless Child sounds like a reference to the Unearthly Child, which is the very first episode of Doctor Who and refers to Susan Foreman. Does this mean Susan Foreman's coming back? Probably not, but I'm interested to see if they do go anywhere with that kind of line. I just think it works as an episode. I don't know. I can kind of see why people didn't like it, but I really do. I think this is an extremely strong episode, and honestly, one of my favorites. I just think it works. But yeah, no, I like this episode a lot.